morning, it's Chuck here at Garden Spot Acres. We're ready to go ahead and put our puzzle onto our table, and we're going to be epoxying that after we get it placed into position. So we're going to thin some of this out in a bowl, use a brush, spread it on the tabletop, slide the puzzle onto that. Okay. Then once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and use the Modge Podge on the top of the puzzle itself. We have to seal everything before we use the epoxy. I'm just thinning that out a bit to make it a little bit easier to brush. I've already got my tabletop here marked from here to here. So the puzzle's got to go into this area here. So I just give you some boundaries here. Right, the puzzle's almost the full width, just a little bit short. So I'm going to go from here to there, up to there. I'll take that puzzle. Slide it on. Yeah, you just got to work pretty fast. That Modge Podge dries pretty quick, even when you thin it down. And I had to trim this puzzle a little bit, and I used a razor type scissor, and I'll show you that in a minute. But the puzzle was just a touch wider this way than the tabletop. So I'll show you those cutters in a minute that I used. I have some other things I'm going to put along the edges here, and when this puzzle's ready, when I think this is set up on here enough, I'm going to go ahead and Modge Podge the top. Because you always want to seal your paper products with something before you use the epoxy, because you don't know how the epoxy is going to affect paper, if it's going to bleed the inks or whatever. So seal everything. And you want to seal it with some water-based product. If you use an oil-based product, you might run into a problem where the epoxy actually starts beading up a little bit. And that's a pain, because you got to keep spreading it. And you might be spreading it as it sets up, and it might not look good. So make sure you seal everything with a water-based product, or follow the directions on the epoxy that you're using. The epoxy I am says do not use any oil-based products. Here's what I used to cut the puzzle pieces. Again, I had to cut the top. I cut like a 1/4 inch off. And if you use scissors, you'll end up damaging your pieces. So I use these handy cuts. They're Craftsman. Let me show you how they're set up. So you can see the razor blade goes right down, and instead of crossing another blade, they just cut right onto a surface. So it just cuts them, you know, real smooth. And I cut each individual piece, you know, a 1/4 inch off the edge. And that worked great. All right, a half an hour has passed. I'm ready to put the Modge Podge onto the top of the puzzle. I'm still using that thinned out, but she's thickening back up again because it's been a half an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and carefully put this on top, make sure I don't peel any of these corners. So we'll just coat this with the Modge Podge. And being a little thinned out, it helps it get down into the cracks a little better. But you don't want to thin it so much that it degrades the paper product underneath. And I'm working towards the edges. Again, don't put too much pressure on. You don't want to peel back any of these edges on the puzzle pieces. And it's going different directions now. Make sure it fills in all the gaps. Make sure I don't have any skip spots. We have our puzzle that was all coated with the Modge Podge. That's dried. Now we're going to head in and we're going to fill up some of these black edges here with other things. And one thing I'm going to be using is a vintage Herter's catalog. If you're a sportsman, you recognize Herter's name. They were very famous back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s before they were taken over by Cabela's, I think, in the 80s. But we're going to be using some of their pages on the edges here. And the first one we're going to be doing here is black powder shotguns that they had sold back in 1975 for the big price of $97.46 and $53.60. So we're going to go ahead and Modge Podge the back of this, and I'm going to place that on over on this side over here. So the first thing I'm going to be doing here is just sticking on the advertisements or the descriptions of these items. Put a little Modge Podge in my bowl there, probably about 10 times more than I needed. I'm going to spread this on the back. You never know how stuff is going to work. You know, what they created for today might not work with the paper of, what is that, 45 years ago. But we'll see. Okay, I cut out a whole bunch of different little advertisements. I got one here for how to paint decoys. Here's a description for the Herter's famous number 383 Numera type goose master call. Then we have the Herter's famous this and the Herter's famous that, Herter's famous this. I don't see any world famous stuff on here yet. But they weren't shy on how they described their items. But I'm just going to go ahead and stick these things over here on some of the black areas. Now we're going to create a little area like somebody just emptied out their pockets. You know, he just came in from hunting and he's emptied out his pockets, so we have a Tampa cigar matchbook. Now, since it's 1950s, I went out and picked up a couple cheap silver certificates. And these are 1935 and 1935. let's put them on like, maybe like that. Now I also got some buffalo nickels and some Indian head pennies and some regular nickels, but these are all period coins. There. I'm gonna let this stuff set up a little bit, and I'll be back with you when we coat everything. Looks like it's time to put on another coat of our Modge Podge. All right, you get the idea. I'll see you back at the other side when we get everything Modge Podged. All right, got the whole puzzle coated. We're just gonna go ahead now and smooth that out because I'm obsessive compulsive, I think that's what it's called. I just can't stand having things not look even. There's the tabletop. It's all Modge Podge. Everything's dried. It's been like 14 hours. Now I have some frog tape here. Oh, it looks like this here. Keeps paint out, keeps lines sharp, it says. So I'm going to use that as my dam around the outside edge. See how that works. And you want to seal this really well. I did another tabletop, or actually I did another top recently that I didn't film. And I had an almost imperceptible leak in it. Just a tiny little crack, and it flowed out. So my first pour was low in one spot because it flowed right out the corner. But it fixed on the second pour. That wasn't a problem. I'm just making sure I get it down in here. Very thin area right there along the puzzle. Making sure she's tight right to the tabletop. I think that might work. Now we're going to go ahead and mix our epoxy. Now normally you would have three cups. I have the one because I have exactly the same amount of epoxy as I do hardener right now left in our containers. You can see that right there. All right. So I'm going to put the side A in this Famo wood, or Famo wood, or however you pronounce it, glaze coat. You pour B into A. So I'm going to go ahead and pour A into the container. Let that drain out. Now A's the resin, B's the hardener. In this product, you want to put the hardener into the resin. Now I'll pour the hardener in. Again, these are equal amounts in this product. Take a clean stir stick. And now you stir that for 6 minutes. Okay, we got all this stirred. I've been scraping the sides. Scrape the bottom, make sure everything's incorporated. Now I'm going to pour it into another container. And now I'm going to stir that until it hits 90 degrees. 6 minutes or 90 degrees. See, right now we're at 79. Now there's not nearly enough of this epoxy here. Don't be worried about the air bubbles in it. You'll get those out later when you heat this. I'll show you that when we get there. Like, I can feel this epoxy it's getting pretty warm in my hand. Let me check the temperature. 89.7. I'm going to go ahead and pour this. Normally you would pour right in the center of your project, but I have 2 different levels. So I'm going to pour into the center of this side here, and then pour into the center of this side here. Then I think I'm going to fill in the edges here, so I make sure I get those, because that's where that little tiny gap is. So I'm going to pour part of this in here. Pour part of it in here. I'll spread that around. I'm just using a brush. You can use a putty knife, plastic putty knife if you like. But just let it flood the surface. Now you do have a little bit of time with this, but not a whole heck of a lot of time. So get it where you want it. It's self-leveling. So I'm not worried about this being over the puzzle. I'm going to put another coat on here anyways. Let me get over here. Yeah, it's better to build up with, I found, with small coats. You know, thinner coats, and try to dump on a half a gallon all at once. It just seems like it does a better job, you know, getting the bubbles out. I'm just trying to fill in that edge a little bit. Let me dump some there. Now I'm just pushing it into that little edge there. I'll smooth this out as best I can. Draw it into the middle of the puzzle. Again, I'm not worried about this. I'm going to put another pour on it. All right, I don't know if you can see it, but there are some tiny little air bubbles in there. You can use a blowtorch or, yeah, there are a lot of bubbles coming out there. Yep, they're popping. I'm adding a little support to this funny edge here. And these edges here look like they're going to be fine. You know, I have the tape snug right to the side. But it's these edges in here that had that little bit of lip. I'm just going to add a little support behind there, because it's just falling over a little bit too much than I like. There. But I'm going to let that cure now, and we'll come back with the second pour. See you then. The epoxy is set up here overnight, and she's set up. You can see that the middle doesn't have anything on it yet. So I'm going to make up another batch of epoxy, just like we did yesterday. Measuring out carefully part A, part B, pouring B into A, mixing it for 6 minutes, and then pouring it into a clean container, and we'll stir it again for 6 minutes or until it hits 90 degrees. And ours has been hitting 90 degrees, you know, in about 6-7 minutes. So I just go up to 90 with it and pour it on. I'm sure my wife won't mind me using the little meat mallet here. All right, we're gonna pour that now. We stirred for 6 minutes, pouring it into another container. And we'll stir that for 6 minutes or until it hits 90 degrees. All right, we're coming up at the end of our 6 minutes here. Let me check the temperature. 87.2. Close enough. It's 6 minutes. Okay, we're going to dump right in the center. Then I'm going to dump some on each side. I'll get that cleaned up before I catch hell. All right, gonna move it around. This is self-leveling, so you don't have to worry about the lines that are in it while you're working it. Just gotta be careful. You don't want to work this once it starts setting up. She won't self-level. Got one more coat to put on here tomorrow. All right, I'll see you then. All right, we're gonna go ahead and mix up our final batch of epoxy. And you can see, I don't know if I can catch it with the camera, but there are some spots here. That need fixing. That's why we use thin coats instead of one big thick coat. But right there are a bunch of dimples. I don't know what caused that, but the last coat will take care of that. Right, she's set up. Poured this yesterday. Going to go ahead and take off our strips and our tape, see how that comes off. I got a feeling I'm going to have to sand the edges. I think they did their job. It feels pretty good there like that. It's got a little ridge on it right there. I'll hit with the sander. So you can see that edge right there. You know, I think I like the way that works. And I think I like the way it looks. There's like a little frosted edge right there. Just gotta be careful I don't get over here and hit the glazed, the glossy surface. Go quick, there we go. I really like the way that looks. Got like a little frosted edge because the sandpaper is like 220 grit. Again, you can polish these up. You can use up to 1000 grit, 2000 grit. But I like the way that looks. I'm going to leave it that way. All right, the edge is done. I got a little right there. There we go. Yeah, I really like the way that turned out on the edge. It looks really nice. Get that edge, make sure there's no drips. Just wanted to give you a quick cover crop update. Okay, underneath the radishes here we have hairy vetch and winter rye. And over here we have some radishes in here, along with some oats. Take a walk out here, show you how tall these things are. Let's go ahead and pluck one of these radishes out of here and see what that looks like. This size that radish. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, almost 16 inches long. They do so much for the garden. Well, that was just a quick update on the cover crops. Let's get back to the epoxy tabletop. All right, putting our second coat on here. Got some brackets here. Some little screws. Hey, thanks a lot for watching the video. Hope you liked the build. We put new videos out every Sunday and Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. And we just surpassed 250,000 views and 1,500 subscribers. Thanks so much for your support. We'll see you on the next video. Hope you guys have a great evening. Bye-bye.